Hello there, welcome to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. This week, we're spotlighting some of the biggest environmental stories across the country, from Greenpeace demanding accountability from major polluters and to Cebu City's efforts to cut down on single-use plastics. First up, I spoke with Jefferson Chua, a climate campaigner from Greenpeace Philippines, to talk about why climate polluters need to be held accountable now more than ever.
Contributed by developed countries pales in comparison to the needs of especially frontline communities. And it's not just the fact that the fund is so small. It's also the fact that climate impacts are escalating. So we are expecting more costs down the line. So and it's not just here in the Philippines. It's really around the world where different areas who haven't experienced climate impacts are now experiencing them at an escalated rate. Here in the Philippines, we're pretty, unfortunately, we're pretty used to big climate impacts. But the reality is that a lot of the communities here in the Philippines are also pushed the limit, and that means funds used to recover from these climate impacts are also pushed to the limit. For example, last year, in the string of 6 typhoons we had in November, the calamity fund for the Philippines really whittled down. And that is really a foretaste of how costs will go up and how governments will be challenged beyond their limit to cope with these escalating climate impacts.
Of course, when we talk about the climate impact here in the country, there are also people saying that the Philippines is also responsible for a bit of the pollution that does affect the climate change. Does the Philippines actually contribute to a lot of the climate damage? How much of the percentage of the climate damage can be attributed to the Philippines in particular?
The reality is that the Philippines is one of the least contributors of carbon emissions historically. You have to look at the accumulation of carbon in the atmosphere as a historical thing. And that means that the most developed countries around the world have benefited with their development at the expense of increased carbon levels in the atmosphere, and which leads to increased climate impacts also on the ground. So if we look at it this way, the Philippines does contribute just a little amount to the carbon levels in the atmosphere, which is why there is that injustice element. Why do countries like the Philippines, who contribute so little to carbon emissions, suffer the most when it comes to climate impacts? Which is why this fund is really important for developing countries to have a fighting chance amidst escalating climate impacts.
And of course, you mentioned the word injustice. Again, is this, in your mind, the biggest injustice in terms of the climate conversation, that the countries that are more responsible, at least percentage-wise, to climate change all over the world are not really contributing as much as they should to areas that are more impacted by these climate disasters?
One of the things that a lot of people don't see is that the discussions on loss and damage aren't new. They have been here for decades. In fact, as early as 2007, the most vulnerable countries in the Pacific Islands actually already broached the idea that, hey, why shouldn't we have a fund to respond to loss and damage? And this dragged on for years, right? Because developed countries didn't want to face the music when it comes to their responsibility to climate impacts. And it's also because it's money. We don't see developed countries taking responsibility for the damages that climate impacts incur. And fortunately, after how many years it was finally operationalized. But again, as you said a while ago, only 0.2% of the fund has been filled up. And this is also because of the continued refusal of different developed countries who have fossil fuel interests, right, to contribute less, because contributing is tantamount to an acceptance of that responsibility. And we know now that because the fund is this low, countries still refuse, right? The biggest polluters still refuse to acknowledge the responsibility to helping out the most at-risk nations to climate impacts.
You know, you mentioned it a while ago, this requires international action. Now, for that to happen, the local government or the Philippine government has to be able to actually push for that and to try and hold more of the major polluters accountable. How can the government do that? What are the avenues that you see as Greenpeace for the government to try and pursue to try and address yung climate issues po natin, especially when it comes to the major polluters, especially those who are in certain industries? You mentioned fossil fuel and oil a while ago as well.
Well, one is the fact that we are the host country for the fund responding to loss and damage. So we are in a prime position to call for payment for loss and damage from big polluters. And we're not just talking about countries, right? We're also talking about the companies behind the increased amounts of carbon emissions in the atmosphere, right? And nationally, right, one of the ways that Philippines can lead the way is to show through its national policies that it is willing to make polluters pay and demand payment for loss and damage. And one of the key pieces of legislation that we have been lobbying for in Congress is the Climate Accountability Bill. This is a bill that was proposed back in November 2023 by the Committee on Climate Change Chair, Congressman Chato, and we have been really pushing and advocating for this piece of policy. Basically it is a polluters pay policy, right? Where the government collects revenue, right, from the biggest polluters and pulls that into a fund where communities can access directly for their recovery costs, right? For the costs incurred for climate impact. So we see that it is possible to create policy frameworks when it comes to polluters pay, and it's not just here in the Philippines. We also see other countries doing exactly the same. For example, in California, in the state of California in the USA, they are pushing for what they call a climate super fund, which gets revenues as well for emissions from big oil and gas companies to fund recovery costs for loss and damage. So it's not just exactly the Philippines that's doing this, it's also other countries. So it's really high time that different countries around the world pursue national legislation to make polluters pay.
Jeff, how have countries, corporations avoided taking responsibility in your mind when it comes to being able to be accountable for their percentage of the climate change and the disasters that it does entail?
Since the 1950s, companies such as BP, such as Shell have already known, right? We have seen studies after studies from 50s, 60s, and 70s where their own scientists have sounded the alarm for the possibility of runaway climate change because of increased emissions and because of increased extraction. Now, we see that a lot of these companies, while they're expanding, are also continually denying their responsibility to climate change. In fact, one of the things that we fail to realize on an everyday basis is that even the idea of individual carbon footprint was essentially a marketing tool, to pass responsibility to individual consumers and drive away the gaze, right, to these big companies and their responsibility. So in terms of the responsibility, not just the emissions that they cause, but also the pattern of denial from the big companies that still perpetuate the climate crisis.
Jeff, of course, we now have to ask you, how can Filipinos find out more about your advocacy and join your call to make the climate polluters pay? What are the avenues for them to try and be part of your advocacy?
There is a big push for globally called the Polluters Pay Pact. We are pushing for different governments around the world to make polluters pay, and the voice must come, right, from frontline people, from people at the front lines of the climate crisis, concerned citizens, government people, and even ordinary citizens who are impacted in many ways by the climate crisis. We don't see it as much, but we also see the rising food prices as also a consequence, right, of a lot of these climate impacts. So it's really high time that we realize that it's not just the burden of taxpayers' money and government money that needs to be used to be able to recover from climate impacts, but really, right, the astronomical profits of big oil and gas companies who must give their fair share to respond to escalating climate impacts. So this is a global petition. We have launched this already, and this is available in our websites to be able to be part of this. And we will be bringing these demands. Right now, we already have 182,000 signatures, and we are really hoping to push, right, for huge changes and reforms, even in multilateral and international spaces, to really make polluters pay.
When we return, let's see how Cebu City takes a bold step towards a plastic-free future. Stay with us. You're watching Weather HQ. Welcome back to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Cebu City is raising the bar in the fight against plastic pollution. Under Mayor Nestor Archival's leadership, City Hall has introduced a policy encouraging employees and visitors to use reusable tumblers, a simple move that has helped reduce single-use plastic waste. To tell us more, here's my conversation with Cebu City Mayor Nestor Archival.
It should be understood to everyone, especially in the City Hall, that every bottle that we are going to eliminate from City Hall, that will bring a big advantage to the city. Now, it is the protection of the environment. And everybody should realize that the environment is all life. Now, we need to protect life. So by eliminating one plastic bottle at a time, we are helping the environment. So that's why the first step that I made is that all the department heads should have its own tumbler. Because every time we have a meeting, there are about 25 department heads. Our personnel will give each of the personnel one bottle. The moment they leave about 25 bottles. The next meeting, you have another 20 or 50. And in one day, in a meeting, it reaches about 200 to 250 bottles. So what I did is to ask them that we're going to start. It is a responsible act of leadership. So if our people will see that we're doing this, it will be very sure that everybody will follow. And from City Hall, it goes down to the barangay captains, to the barangay councilors, then to the constituents as a whole.
Mayor, if I'm not mistaken, nagsimula yung policy nito start of the month, I believe, start of July. When we talk about yung adapting period in terms of making sure na wala ng single-use plastics or plastic bottles sa City Hall, how has the administration adapted to that? Siyempre, it's a bit of a change in pati rin sa suppliers and making sure that lahat mga functions po ninyo are actually still well hydrated. What adjustments did the administration actually have to make sure na this is enforceable sa City Hall?
Paolo, it should be noted that it should be in phasing. The first phase would be the department heads within the next 4 weeks, and later it will be going down to the section heads, and afterwards all the employees. We have about 7,000 employees in the City Hall. And within the 100 days, we hope that everybody should have its own tumbler.
What are the plans? Mayor, sorry, I just wanted to ask again, what are the plans to expand this beyond City Hall? Of course, maganda yung plano na mention niyo po, starting it with the department heads and then trickling it down to the rest of the members of City Hall. Pero beyond City Hall, how do you think this policy can actually spread?
Okay. The moment we will have to complete this within the next 100 days, we will now going to the schools. And it is I believe that the school administration will actually help us and will just follow what we're doing.
Sir, the DANR actually did mention that they do support yung mga efforts po ninyo. Especially, may balita po ngayon, may mga ulat na may microplastics sa Tanyon Strait. Of course, there are environmental concerns that your LGU in particular has to address. How has your administration started or at least planned to start addressing yung mga environmental concerns po nito?
No, again, it is one battle at a time. So the moment we can explain, and I think, and I believe that the people in City Hall can understand. What is very important is for them to understand so that they would follow. There are initiatives that will just impose without people understanding. So the most important thing here is that the people in City Hall could understand what we're doing, that eliminating one bottle at a time is very important to us. It's very important in taking care of the environment. Now, the environment is basically life. And without environment, then, of course, we're not taking the environment, we're not taking life. So in this case, we need to let them understand, again, in the first place, in the City Hall, we let them understand that taking care of the environment is very important. And eliminating plastic, one plastic at a time in City Hall, then eventually we will be going to the schools, we will be going to the barangays, and hopefully, in the next 6 months, we can probably have about 90% people will not be using bottled or single-use plastic in Cebu City.
Mayor, gano'n ka-importante yung upcycling din? Because we are now showing a bit of material a while ago from the Archival House, House Close to Nature po, yung nakasulat sa shirt. And they are upcycling, you're upcycling yung mga plastic bottles. Is that also a step that you feel that can be taken eventually? Sabi mo nga, step by step dapat yung process of trying to eliminate yung single-use plastics. But then, is upcycling part of yung mga plano po ninyo in the pipeline?
That's correct. So this is parallel. We're slowly eliminating plastics, first in City Hall, in the schools, in the barangays. But you cannot eliminate it right away. So what is very important, if there are some waste plastic, we will not be throwing them to the landfill, but we're going to use this into other use, and we call this as upcycling. And in my case, in my house, I'm using plastics in order to grow plants. So again, this is upcycling.
Mayor, let's talk about mga formal policies and ordinances that are in the pipeline to address environmental issues sa Cebu City. Are there any in the works that we can expect in the future to make all of these efforts more mandatory for the LGU?
Now, we have this ordinance already that all waste should be segregated.
Okay.
So we have what we call as the biodegradable, we call that as here in Bisaya as malata, and you have the recyclables. So again, since we have that laws already in place, what is very important right now for the city is to implement them. Because we have so many environmental laws here in Cebu, but I realize that it's not being implemented well. So again, the challenge now is how to implement them strictly. So there is a way. Another way is that we have a program here in the city in cooperation with JICA and SM. And one of the most difficult is the plastics, because the single-use plastics are the ones that being thrown anywhere. So that's why we launched this project in one of the barangay as a pilot project, that all the plastics, all kind of plastics are being put into one receptacle and being processed. And this, after being processed and built, this would be delivered to a cement factory that would be used as fuel. So hopefully, we have started it for the last 2 weeks. And in Barangay Luz, they have 10 tons of garbage per day. And right now, after 2 weeks, they were able to eliminate 3 tons of plastics per day. And this is something, for me, this is a successful one. And hopefully, if if the model in Barangay Luz would be successful, and I think it is very successful, it will now trickle down to each and every barangay. And in that case, it's not only advocacy, but this advocacy will have a financial gain to the constituents. So for me, it's not good only to tell them that, look, we need to segregate. But if you're going to tell them you need to segregate because there's money in waste, then they will be more inspired to help.
And that's it for Weather HQ. Thank you so much for joining us, staying informed and engaged. I'm Paolo del Rosario. See you next week right here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.